Welcome to Dr. Joe Unplugged. This podcast contains general information and is not in any way medical advice. Sugar or artificial sweeteners? The argument continues to rage as to which is better. First point to be made is, how do you define better? Now, something that I didn't know, but found out in doing a bit of research for this podcast, is that saccharin, which was the first widely commercialised non-nutritious or nutritive, depending which jargon you want to use, sweetener, was actually discovered in 1879. That's nearly 150 years ago. I didn't know it was as old as that, which tells you that, even way back then, people were sort of thinking, can we get the sweet flavour without the calories? And even the concept of calorie had only just been invented at that time. That's a whole interesting story as well. But the arguments have raged, and saccharin has gone out of favour. It's hardly used these days. The term saccharin sweet had some carriage probably in the 70s and 80s when it was in more wide use. So there's a new study links sweetener to heart risk. Always love links, What does that actually tell you? It means they found the two roughly in the same area, but does it prove anything? So, quote, is going sugar-free really good advice for patients with cardiometabolic risk factors? Work done by the Cleveland Clinic, published in Arteriosclerosis, Thrombosis and Vascular Biology. Gee, there's a lot of journals out there. They've got 10 healthy participants who ate 30 grams of erythritol, which is one of the artificial sweeteners. Now, when you buy a lot of products that haven't got sugar, but they are still sweet, there'll be a variety of these different sweeteners. 30 grams is a reasonable amount. That's one of the criticisms of the study. 30 minutes later, and I'm quoting, their blood showed enhanced platelet aggregation and increased markers of platelet responsiveness and activation. Platelets are the small cells in the bloodstream that gather together, aggregate, as they use the word there, to form a blood clot. Now, if you cut yourself, you might bleed for a little while. The platelets will come together also with some proteins and other factors, form a blood clot, stops you bleeding to death. That's a really useful thing. But a blood clot in the wrong place at the wrong time can cause a heart attack, can cause a stroke, can cause a deep vein thrombosis. Again, I'll quote, specifically the researchers saw enhanced stimulus-dependent release of serotonin, which is interesting, it's one of the happy hormones, a marker of platelet-dense granules, and CXCL4, and no, I don't know what that stands for either, a platelet alpha granule marker. Look, let's keep it simple. Essentially what they're saying is for 10 people after 30 minutes compared to people who didn't take the erythritol, there was some changes in platelet activity. Now, it's a big jump from a difference in platelet activity 30 minutes, after consuming a reasonably, not mega, but reasonably high dose of erythritol. Gee, it is a tongue twister, isn't it? That's probably why they like it as a number on packets so you don't have to say it. Compared to participants who ate glucose or sugar and had no effect. So can we conclude from that sugar is better than the artificial sweetener? No. I mean, what happens after 60 minutes? What about after 2 days? Does it have a lasting effect? The erythritol does not activate the platelets. It lowers the threshold for triggering a response. So this is, fascinating for people who spend their lives in laboratories, and that's, it's a useful thing that people do that. But what does it actually mean back in the real world? In 2001, the FDA classified erythritol as in inverted commas, generally recognised as safe, close inverted commas, food additive. It's actually found naturally in melons and grapes, and the human body actually produces small amounts of it, probably not 30 grams at one bolus dose. And previous work from the same group has shown it to be a risk for adverse cardiovascular events and clotting. The lead researcher thinks it's a really important study. That's fine. Probably not surprising. Critics have said that the study's unrealistic because the dose is too high. It's and the critics have a valid point, albeit again, it's only one piece of the jigsaw. So what does that mean for the rest of us? Safe essentially says that if you take it, it's not going to kill you, as against perhaps arsenic. That's useful. Obviously, we don't want anything in our foods that's potentially lethal. So saying that it's safe is one thing. That's different to saying that it's necessary or good for us. So it's certainly not nutritious. It provides nothing that the body needs, notwithstanding the body manufactures a very small amount of it itself. But it's not something we need. We have artificial sweeteners so that we don't have sugar. Why do we do that? Well, we want the taste of sweetness without the calories of sugar. But sugar, for example, in our tea or coffee, most people will put 1 or at most 2 teaspoons in. Yeah, there might be a few of you out there who do more, but that's typically it. And a cup of tea or coffee, probably somewhere between 250 and 375 mils. Also depends on whether you're getting a cup or a mug or the giant size. A can of soft drink, which might be between 300 and 375 mils. And I apologise to the American listeners, I haven't got the conversion at the top of my head, but it's roughly, I think, 28 mils in an ounce. I wouldn't swear to it. In a can of soft drink, you've got about 11 teaspoons of sugar. I don't think most people put 11 teaspoons of sugar into their tea or coffee. The problem with sugar also is the hidden sugars. So not the obvious sugars in sweet food. If you like an ice cream cone on a Sunday, yeah, it's got some sugar in it, but if you're having it on a Sunday as a treat, that really is not a problem. If you're having ice cream cones breakfast, lunch and dinner every day of the week, that is a problem, and particularly if it's added to soft drink and a whole lot of other processed foods with a high sugar content. So again, another commentator, new research adds another piece to the puzzle. Somebody from Birmingham says, I think these results are concerning. Somebody else says they don't really think these results tell us anything. The arguments will go on. I think the key to all of this is that it's arguably better, and opinions will vary on this, I accept that. It's arguably better to have a little bit of the real thing. So we don't want to eat a lot of sugar, but we can be selective as to how we choose our calories, which means that if we're not eating a lot of highly processed, low-fat foods, typically with a high sugar content, because when you take the fat out, they have to put something else in, and that's usually sugar. So we're minimising those, and we're enjoying our sweet treats for those of you who've got a sweet tooth, and I'll put my hand up on that as well. But it's a controlled thing. We're not getting the hidden sugars. And the other key to this, and I know I bang the drum about it, but it is important, is processed foods. The more processed foods there are, the more we consume, the higher the amount of variably sugars, preservatives, additives, and that includes artificial sweeteners we're likely to get. One particular trap for people who are looking to reduce their sugar content and say, I'm not going to eat the muesli bar, I'm going to get a protein bar, is you also need to watch those because some of them will also have sugar contents or reasonable contents of artificial sweeteners. If you're having one of those a day, once again, it's not a problem. It is the total amount that counts. There's very, very little that we can consume or take that is absolutely poisonous or not poisonous or safe or not safe. Botox is one of the most lethal poisons on the planet. Weight for weight, it is one of the most lethal poisons on the planet. A lot of people have it injected into them in very small amounts. If it was a big amount, it'd be a massive problem. So is Botox safe or not safe? It depends on the amount. Are artificial sweeteners safe or not safe? It depends on how much you take of them. And no, you're not going to fatally overdose on them, obviously, but they're not going to be doing you a lot of good. And by the way, you've got to think if you're having a lot of them, what else are you taking in with it? A little bit of sugar is also not intrinsically safe or not safe. You can have a little bit of sugar, but not too much. If you have too much, it's going to, you know what it's going to do. It's going to sit around your middle and on your hips, and you're going to wonder, how did I get into this point? So it's keeping it controlled. But there is a lot to be said for as much as we can eating real versus fake foods of any description. Anything that's a substitute or an alternative may have a role, but there's never such a thing as a free lunch. So enjoy a little bit of sugar if you've got a sweet tooth. You can consume a little bit of artificial sweetener. Don't stress about either of them. Really, we don't want to stress about either of them. What we want to do is control the amount that we take in, and in turn, that's going to be a factor of where you're at in your life. If you're looking to maintain weight, you've obviously got more capacity than if you're wanting to reduce weight. So apply common sense, or apply those basic principles to your situation, keeping in mind that your situation may also vary from time to time as you go through your life. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also follow it on all the socials. There'll be new content uploaded each week.